All right, I am here with Zach Schnitzer, the writer, director, and star of Loafers, which is having its Chicago premiere next Wednesday at the Music Box Theater, the best theater in the city, at the Chicago Critics Film Festival. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk. Congratulations on the film. I really, really enjoyed it. I would love to talk to you first about how much influence improv may or may not have had in some of these scenes because I got the vibe immediately within the first 5 minutes. I forget the term that he uses, but the martial arts thing that the one friend
Yes.
does in the back, that conversation that whole group has is just how my friends and I talk to each other in a nutshell. And I just was like, man, some of these moments, like I'm sure that they're scripted, but I would really love to know how much of this just comes to them off the dome. So I was wondering how much influence that may or may not have had in the moment or on set.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I one of my sort of philosophies on set is I like to let the actors like play a little bit before like as we're rolling, and then once I feel like they're in a place where they are ready to go, I like to hit them with an action when you're ready, which is sort of my way of telling them that you guys still have the agency to keep playing around a little bit longer if you'd like to. For that scene specifically, though, it was pretty much scripted all the way until like the very end. And then on it was going to be sort of a hard cut, but then the actor Dan Haller, who plays Cameron, who's the first one to say like I don't think that that's qigong. He was like we should make this sort of the button of the scene, and then we kept playing around with that, and after a couple takes that was what we landed on. So I appreciate that it feels like it was improvised because for that scene a lot of it wasn't, but improv is very welcome on my sets, and you don't have to be word perfect. I'm not precious about my text in that way when I'm writing.
That's cool. It's really cool. The a lot of the characters in the film, they have kind of one sustaining trait or conflict about themselves that lasts the whole film and kind of is the crux of their development and their growth. And the characters are always consistently evolving based on that one thing. Like the one character has an issue with his mom, and Cyrus can't find a place to say. You feel like you're being walked over the whole time by people,
Mhm.
and so I was wondering how you guys went about keeping the consistency of these characters and their arcs based on something that may feel kind of small, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was due to a lot of things. In the writing process, the first draft of the script was very much like 55 pages, and a lot of the scenes were just like actors improvise about whatever. And my producer, Nate, he was the one who sort of helped me with a lot of revisions and giving me notes. And because it's an ensemble movie, I really wanted each character to feel different. So the
Mhm.
easiest way for me to do that was to pick something that was happening to me or to one of my friends and just sort of plaster it on them as like this is them to
Mm.
start. And then the luckiest part about it for me was that I have a bunch of really talented friends who are phenomenal intuitive actors. So I got to build the characters. They were all sort of the cherry on top. A lot of them were a part of the writing process with me towards the end of it, especially. Like I would go, for example, like Melissa Marie, who plays Molly in it. There were a lot of times when she was just like over at my apartment, we were hanging out as a group, and I would be like, "Hey, I have a question about this scene. Like, how would you respond to someone in this situation? Given this circumstance?" And she'd be like, "Oh, okay."
Mhm.
And it was so molding it to the actors and having really smart actors, meaning my friends. I got lucky. Really helped sort of individualize them all because going into it, that was not something at the front of my mind, and that was something that I learned in the writing process of the movie. So
Cool. And I like that you brought up the collaboration that you had with everybody because I was reading in like the press kit and whatnot how everybody was kind of wearing multiple hats on set and everybody
yes.
was doing kind of different jobs. And I was wondering how that process worked in post because I know one of the privileges of kind of DIY on set is the equipment can be like the restrictions can make the equipment a little bit minimalist, but it almost makes it easier to learn and wear multiple hats. And then
Oh
when
yeah.
you're in post everything can kind of look like a spaceship and it might be a little bit more difficult for people to adapt. So I
Yes.
was wondering if there were any challenges that you guys met in post that may have been different than ones that you found on set.
Yeah. I mean, well, I'll start with the editing. Me and Nate, who was also the producer, co-edited the movie, and it was my first time editing a feature because I have a lot of experience editing like shorter form, like social media, YouTube type things. And going into it, the first couple passes of the movie ended up, because I am not like a trained editor, I don't speak editing quite yet. In terms of like the actual tools on Premiere that I was using, like I didn't know that super soundly yet. And so that was something that I had to learn with Nate, and we would sort of pass it off back and forth and give each other notes. But I would say that was the biggest run in we had. I got really lucky with one this independent production company who also has a color studio in Chicago called Quicksilver Color, which is run by Ryan C. Semple or C. Ryan Semple, who is now a good friend of mine and also like a very generous collaborator. And he gave us a really nice deal on his services. And we have worked together, and we're working together on the next film that I'm shooting later this summer. So I got really lucky with people trusting me and my cast in the movie, and like coming together to make this sort of labor of love story. It was great.
Yeah. I've heard of that color suite actually. Now that you mentioned it,
Oh
I
yeah,
loved watching the movie and just seeing all of the like local businesses in the background, or like, oh, the store that's behind where they're standing in this intersection. It was it felt
yeah,
like I was just, yeah, it felt like I was there. Um,
great.
and I would have never noticed you talk the how you were saying you were still kind of learning editing and learning Premiere. I would have never noticed that. I thought the cutting
Oh,
was wonderful. And
thanks.
I was wondering, when it comes to shooting these really extended conversation scenes, because they do go on for a long time, and the characters are, like we talked about earlier, they're always evolving in these kind of longer takes, single cam setups. And so I was wondering how you guys blocked setups or blocked actors, or how much of it was just kind of like in the moment, oh, this person's moving this way, I've got to move the camera. The scene that really stood out to me the most was when you and Q get back to the house and he's on the couch upset about
Ah,
the young man. I was like, they're really moving this thing. This is sick.
thank you,
And
thank
I
you.
was like, and it feels very impromptu in a like effectively planned way. So I was wondering how you guys went about blocking stuff like that.
Oh man, that makes me smile. That's one of my favorites. Yeah, we blocked that one. That was probably one of the things we did the most amount of times. But
Mhm.
that was something I shot listed because I had three cam ops and sort of three DPs. Like we all sort of collectively designed the movie in that way. But I had it because that's my house. So we had the luxury of being able to be on location ahead of time. So
Yeah.
I blocked that outside of set with him. He just came over with his camera and we just, or even his phone sometimes, and we would just shoot um, that scene and a couple others as well. But I don't know. I'm really interested in this sort of like multiple frames within one shot type of thing. Like
Mhm.
there's a YouTube video I watched where somebody breaks down Raiders of the Lost Ark and how Spielberg made like there was one shot that was super famous because it has like eight different frames and setups within one long take. And
Oh
I was just so
wow.
fascinated. But yeah, it's I don't remember what it's called. You should check it out.
Yeah.
But that was sort of the sort of idea with that is I didn't want to let people escape the moment and forget about the sort of separate conversations that were happening, like which is why I pulled Isaac and Q away so that we remember that this is new to her and she's never been in this house before, and like she comes back and she doesn't know them, and then ending with the introduction of Q and Cyrus, that moment at the end there. So it does take a lot of rehearsal. There were some other longer takes that we did that we did not rehearse as much. That were sort of like we shot listed this, like let's maybe do some coverage, and then like we did the first one, we're like this isn't working, let's move on, or vice versa. We're like this is working, let's just zone in on this. And I again, it's all about having actors who are smart, intuitive, and prepared. And I got really lucky with that. So
Awesome. One of my favorite things when I'm watching films like yours is the little inside jokes that people that you guys will put into the edit that clearly are not meant for like other people to understand. They're just kind of like for you guys when you're working on it, little things you put in there. The your Deep Blue Sea poster on the wall. Every time I saw it, I was like, that is
bro,
awesome.
that's hilarious. Yeah.
um, I was wondering if you could talk a bit about how important it was for you to have, and all the characters do this at some point in the movie, but I was really drawn to how how much focus you put on the male characters saying that they love each other every time they leave,
Hmm.
even when they're furious at each other.
Hmm.
You and Isaac in particular, and uh, obviously Q and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the other two women's names that live in the house together. They go through those arguments and they say that to each other, but you really make a point to have the men say it almost every time. And so I was wondering if you could talk about how important that was for you in this process.
Well, dude, if I'm being completely honest, like that is just how I talk to my friends.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily realize it was going to be something special about the movie until people started saying it to me, which has been honestly really rewarding. Um, but people have been bringing that up to me. I I mean, I believe it's the way that male friendship should be, and I think
Hmm.
there's a lot of masculinity that's very toxically not vulnerable or honest in that way. And I just have never, that's never been my speed. So it sort of feels like it's just lifting up something that I'm very proud of in my life and my friendships with specifically like the male friendships I have in my life. So yeah, I appreciate that's been highlighted, but it was not an intentional thing. It was just like, all right, well, these characters are leaving and saying goodbye. How would they do that? They would dap each other up and say, like, love you, see you next time. And
Hmm.
um, that was just like how my life was, because this is sort of a B version of the life that I was living with my friends in college. So
Nice. I've got one more question for you, and I just want to keep it as open ended as willing as you're willing to share. But what's next? I know that you said that you're shooting a film this summer. No
yeah,
pressure to share anything that you can't, but I'm excited. So I would love to hear anything you've got.
yeah. I'll do a little. We're getting funding right now for a movie that um, we're shooting in Traverse City, Michigan,
Oh,
later this
nice.
year. It's going to be
I
called
love Traverse
Snowflake
City.
Lake. Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful town. But
Yeah,
it's written by Melissa Marie, who's in Loafers, plays Molly, and two other friends of ours, and it's a story about these young siblings, these 20 something siblings who inherit a cabin and sort of figure out their childhood cabin and try to figure out whether or not they want to move on from this very special place and sell it or stay and celebrate it all. And it's full of, queer shenanigans, and it's a very fun time. So it's definitely a pivot from Loafers, but I'm more excited, especially because I didn't write it. It's like femme led, queer led, fun story at a lake cabin. So it'll be beautiful. But
nice.
we're getting funding for that right now. I'm directing it, and yeah, I don't know. That's sort of all I can say at this point in terms of
Yeah,
updates about it. But yeah,
totally. That's great. I'm gonna
yeah.